Hello, this is Tommy Franks. Welcome to the 4-Star Leadership Podcast, a product of the General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute and Museum. We're here to get a view into the lives of the legacy makers, the movers and the shakers of today, to offer insights from the full spectrum of the leadership community. We'll talk to former 4-star students and explore their leadership development path. We'll work to find out what they are about today and learn from the opportunities they've made for themselves in this world. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this podcast. Remember, leaders are not born, they're developed.
Hello, and welcome to the Core Principles of Leadership with General Tommy Franks. I am your host, Delise Travis. We're on episode number 24 with our guest, David Sampson, President and CEO of American Property Casualty Insurance Association. In this episode, David offers sage advice for students and professionals alike to listen to wise people who offer you advice and take the hard jobs that no one else wants. He emphasizes that the character and commitment of who you work for is vitally important, as well as the people they surround themselves with. It all begins with the tone at the top, he says. David also shares a personal experience that was so empowering it became his North Star for the last 17 years. This episode is packed with wisdom derived from experience and great inspiration that you won't want to miss. But before we join our guest, we'll have a word from our major sponsor, REI Oklahoma.
REI Oklahoma is proud to be a part of the General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute in the production and distribution of these podcasts, designed to inspire leaders and difference makers. At REI Oklahoma, we have been working with small business leaders, entrepreneurs, and people who are driven to succeed for years. Highly motivated people working to own their own businesses, live in their own homes, and make the world a better place. Since its beginning, REI Oklahoma has continued to identify hurdles and deliver holistic solutions to create job growth and help neighborhoods thrive in both rural and urban communities. REI Oklahoma looks forward to visiting with you about helping your business and community grow. Visit reiok.org or call 800-658-2823 to start the conversation.
The LaBarre family is a fourth-generation Oklahoma family. That may not sound like a long time, but our grandfathers were born here, within the Comanche Nation, before the land runs. We are the proudest sponsor of the Tommy Franks 4-Star Leadership Podcast. We hope listeners will heed the words of these distinguished men and women who have served our country at the highest levels and across all walks of life.
David Sampson is the President and CEO of the American Property Casualty Insurance Association. He has been in this role since 2007. Before joining the industry, Sampson served the George W. Bush administration in 2 presidential-appointed and Senate-confirmed positions. Sampson has led the industry through the most consequential insurance issues of the last decade, including preserving state statutory accounting during once-in-a-generation tax reform and ensuring that the Dodd-Frank Act recognized the strong consumer protections already provided by state insurance regulators and the guarantee fund system. He is leading the organization through what can arguably be called the industry's greatest challenge yet during the pandemic. Sampson graduated from Lipscomb University, where he serves as a distinguished professor of public policy. He earned his doctorate at Abilene Christian University. Sampson serves on the vestry of St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Gainesville, Texas, and is an executive committee member of the Traditional Cowboy Arts Association. He and his wife have ranches in both Texas and Idaho, but more importantly, David has added a new role to his resume, a proud grandfather. Please welcome David Sampson. Good afternoon, Mr. Sampson. Thank you and welcome to our program.
It's a great pleasure and honor to be here.
Well, thank you. I have really been looking forward to this podcast, as I mentioned earlier, and I am excited for you to share your leadership journey, which is extensive and impressive. And I think you have a tremendous amount to share to our students and adult listeners alike. And one of the things that we like to do is start with kind of who you are and what makes you who you are, where your hometown, your parents, your high school, anything that kind of
Sure.
inspired you to later life.
Well, thank you so much, Delise. Yeah, I grew up on a cattle farm in a rural southern Indiana that had been in the families for generations. The White River in southern Indiana divided the farm on the north side of the White River in Knox County, Indiana, was where my father's historic farm was, and then on the south side of the White River was my maternal grandparents' farm. And I loved hearing the stories about when my dad started courting my mother. He kept a rowboat down on the White River, and he would row across to the other side of the river to court my mother. So that gives you a little bit of sense of what life was like back then. And when I was growing up, it had changed somewhat, but it was still pretty much rooted in that period. And I guess some of the earliest stories from my youth as a child left tremendous impressions on me. Stories about the Depression, for example. I remember, my dad telling me that they were picking corn in the river bottoms in October of 1929, when someone behind mules and wagons, and someone pulled up and told my grandfather that the banks had closed, and there was going to be a bank holiday. I guess this was in the early 30s by that point in time. But when my grandfather got that news, my dad told me that the only money that my grandfather had was in his wallet, in his overalls, while they were down working in the fields. And a very similar story on my maternal grandparents' side at that same time. And what I remember most is about their determination to keep the farms together intact, to be able to pay the taxes, keep them in the family. And they were successful at that. And I thought that was a real testimony to that generation of farmers and ranchers.
Tell us about your siblings. So your parents courted,
Yep.
and rode across the river to court, and they married.
Yeah.
And
well, that was after the Second World War. My dad was a World War II combat veteran in the European theater, injured in theater. His father died while in January of 1945, working out in the fields. He and the mule team was struck by lightning, and so when my dad was when VE Day occurred, they were preparing to ship my dad's unit to the Pacific Theater when the war ended in August. He had enough points of being in theater and in combat and being injured that he was early on the demobilization list, and he came back and took over the family farm. Never really got the opportunity to use the GI Bill, although he was a very, very smart man. Graduated from high school at the age of 16. Was excellent in Latin and math, and very, very smart guy. But just because of family circumstances, was never really able to take advantage of a lot of those educational benefits that the veterans received after the end of World War II. My mother was a 19-year-old war widow. when my parents met. She and her high school sweetheart graduated from Petersburg High School in Indiana. They were married in August of 1943 when he came home after training, and immediately shipped out to England as a ball turret gunner on a B-17 flying Fortress. Had flown 29 missions, and on November 30th of 1943 was shot down returning from a bombing mission in Germany, and plane was never recovered. It was shot down over the Zuider Zee, so the plane was never recovered. So my mother, at the age of 19, was a war widow, although it took a period of time for MIAs to be declared officially dead. So that was, that was her experience growing up, and then she eventually met my father in 1952. So I had I have three sisters, two older and one younger, and my mother ended up dying of cancer in 1960, shortly after giving birth to my youngest sister. And so that was I say that to say there are a lot of setbacks in families. Things don't always go in a clear upward trajectory, and I think that taught us from a very early age. I was 3 years old when my mother died. I think it taught us at a very early age the fragility of life, how life is a great blessing, and also how important extended family is, because extended family comes together at times of crisis. And I just saw tremendous resilience and love that was extended throughout our extended family at that time that enabled us to survive that.
I understand the stories of hardship. I know that my family were German immigrants. They have a lot of very hardship stories, and it makes me so appreciative of what they sacrificed so that we could have the life we have today. So I am totally tracking on what you're sharing with us, and I appreciate that. So you have one other sister, two? How many?
I have three sisters, two older and one younger.
So you're the only boy.
Yep.
Okay.
The middle.
So you were kind of in the middle. Okay. So now we know where you are in the childhood string. So you went to high school there where you were from. Did you have any interest in high school that inspired you to your college education, or is there any memories that you feel are something that you want to share from that?
Yeah, well, by the time I got ready for high school, I went to high school at Evansville Central High School. It was a very large school in Evansville, Indiana. They'd built a new campus kind of on the edge of town. It was no longer the old Central High School in downtown. It was more on the north side of town, but very large school. I think my graduating class had 1,000 kids in it. I think, first of all, I would say to all of your high school student listeners, in full disclosure, I was not a big man on campus. I was, I'm not sure I fit real well into the urban academic environment setting, but I did have a number of interests. I mean, my passion for history, I came by that naturally from listening to the stories of my grandparents about, they were not that far removed from, my grandfather had served in World War I. And I guess the arc in my family, they went from doing everything horseback, farming with horse-drawn implements and wagons, to more modern equipment, by the time that I had come along, but they were not that far removed. So I loved hearing those stories. And again, the people that were still alive at that period of time who experienced that, and the buildings and the places. It was kind of immersed in history. And then my uncles who served in World War II, I loved hearing their stories firsthand about being stationed in Europe or in England before the D-Day invasion, and listening to Winston Churchill's speeches on the radio. So I had a great interest in history, and that was a subject one of the few subjects that I excelled in, I guess. I had a speech teacher in high school who took an interest in me and thought that I had some ability in that area. And he entered me into a speech contest that was being sponsored by the Optimist International Club. I ended up going to the state finals and came in second in that competition, which was really a morale boost for a kid that was more comfortable in rural settings and probably more with older folks than I was with younger folks. It was the beginning of what helped me be comfortable in front of people, to formulate thoughts in a concise way. And then after that experience, he recruited me to be on the high school debate team, which was really a great experience in being able to look at debate propositions from both sides and understand the arguments for and against, and being in that kind of competition. And I also was a member of the high school band. I played trumpet. I marched in the marching band and football season. And again, I think all of those things were confidence builders of being in front of thousands of people out on a football field. And if you turned the wrong way, everybody was going to know that you were the one out of sync. And so kind of learning at an early age to operate a bit under pressure and in a public spotlight. And those experiences led directly to my college experience, where one of the reasons I went to Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee, was because of that high school experience. I got a debate scholarship to go to Lipscomb, which had a very strong debate team. But again, I would say, I was certainly not the big man on campus, a bit nerdy for an urban high school setting. And I would just encourage all of your student listeners that, if you peak in high school, if that's the peak of your life, then, that may be pretty sad. So don't get so fixated on where you are in the pecking order in high school. There's a lot of life after high school.
I think it's great, the foundation that you had. And so your speech teacher was basically a really great mentor. And then the speech, being able to stand in front of people and speak, and the critical thinking and debate. Speech and ethics, critical thinking are two main competitions in our 4-star leadership program.
Oh, great.
And so those are exactly follow along with our curriculum and in our leadership development. So I truly appreciate that. So after Lipscomb, what were your decisions then? What inspired you to go on?
Well, and I would say just a little bit more about college, because the real transformational figures in my education occurred at Lipscomb. Fortunately, I was not a great student coming out of high school, very much of a C student. And when I got to college, I had a professor there, chairman of the political science department, which is what I was majoring in. And after the first semester, in the spring semester of my freshman year, he pulled me aside and he said, "David, I think you've got a lot of intellectual potential, academic potential, but you're just not prepared." I went to high school during the 1970s, which were a time of great experimentation in educational theories. And it was all about, you just wanted kids to read. It was very non-directed. And so, you can go to English class and, you can read anything you want to. So, what did I read? I read Field and Stream and Sports Afield and things like that. I'd never read any of the basic classical American Lit or English Lit. I'd never had an English class throughout high school where they taught basic grammar or sentence diagramming. And so Dr. Deese at Lipscomb said, look, David, I think you've got a lot of potential, but you just don't have the foundation. And if you will stay here during the summer and let me put a curriculum together for you during summer school of English grammar, English Lit, American literature, to get that kind of foundation. And I did that. And that, that really was a transformative experience because I went from, a C student in high school and a C student, my first semester, to a B student the second semester. But after that first year, never made anything less than an A in my undergraduate, my graduate, my doctoral program. And I don't say that to brag. I say that to just say the influence of one individual who takes an interest and sees potential can be absolutely transformative. And so seek out those people in your life and in your academic career. I went on from there to be elected president of the student body, the only elected office I've ever stood for, I guess, except I was elected president of the Tennessee College Republican Federation. I was president of the Tennessee College Republican Federation at about the same time where Karl Rove was head of the College Republicans nationally. And so I can't state how much that university experience meant to me. I had the privilege of working on Governor Reagan's 1976 presidential primary campaign in Tennessee, and then went on from there to work for Senator Bill Brock's reelect effort in Tennessee that same year, which is where I met my wife. I recruited my wife to go on a weekend campaign swing with Senator Brock through West Tennessee, and so that college experience was transformative in so many ways in my life.
That's really interesting because I think that mentors can be so inspirational, and we really encourage our students to reach out. And a lot of our speakers have really asked the students, reach out to people. They will help you. I think it's what an incredible difference he made in your life by investing in you and creating that curriculum for you, and what a difference it made. It's just absolutely huge. From there, do you want to share where you kind of went from there?
Yeah. So my senior year of college, I had an interesting job. I worked as a mental health associate at the Parkview Pavilion, which was a private mental hospital in Nashville. And I would say that I had the privilege of what that job meant is I was there from 11 at night to 7 in the morning for any patients who did not sleep, and my job was to be there for them. Interestingly enough, it was a very exclusive private hospital. I got to see a lot of my great country music heroes who came through there, and spend some interesting nights with several of them. Obviously, I won't talk about individuals.
Obviously,
but I was planning to go to Vanderbilt Law School, and that was my plans all along. I was majoring pre-law, a political science major with a pre-law track. And then one night, truly in the middle of the night, after being up all night with some very agitated and troubled patients there, it was almost like an epiphany or a very profound question, which was, do you want to spend the rest of your life being a lawyer? And you got to remember that the late 70s were not a great time for young up-and-coming Republican staffers. That was the years after Watergate. So I'm not saying that there was not some self-interest involved there, but it was really a profound question. I had a minor in theology in an undergraduate school, and that one night prompted me to do some really serious soul searching, whether I wanted to spend the rest of my life in the legal field and in politics, or to do something that I thought would have more lasting value. And so after a couple of days and a couple of more of those nights, I took Karen out to dinner. We were engaged at that time, thinking that we were both going to go to Vanderbilt Law School. And I said, dear, I've decided not to go to law school. I'm going to go to seminary instead. And so I went to seminary, became an ordained minister, and eventually got a doctorate from Abilene Christian University, and thought that was going to be the path for the rest of my life, serving a church in Arlington, Texas, right in the heart of the Metroplex. But I always kept my hand in public policy. I was very engaged civically there. And I had a lot of very prominent business leaders in the church. And I remember shortly after I had finished my doctorate and had graduated, a group of business leaders in town said, look, we know you think this is your calling in life and what you're going to be doing the rest of your life, but have you ever thought about getting back into the area of public policy? We think there's a great need for you. The city and the North Texas economy was going through a major transition from the oil crash, the drawdown after the Cold War. And so I think you have to listen to people in life. God moves in mysterious ways at times, I have found. And so listening to a lot of very wise people, they convinced me that maybe there was a different area that I could bring my talents to. And so I was recruited to be vice president for business development for the Arlington Chamber of Commerce. And that was a period of time where there were a lot of major things going on. The Arlington General Motors assembly plant had been slated for shutdown as GM consolidated. A new ownership group bought the Texas Rangers baseball club in the very late 80s, headed by a young guy by the name of George W. Bush. They were being recruited to move out of Arlington to downtown Dallas. And so I had the opportunity to work on the team that put together the proposals, working with the state and local officials that led to the decision by GM not only to keep the Arlington GM factory open, but significantly expand it. It's been expanded multiple times since 1991 and is still doing well today. And of course, in 1993, the ballpark in Arlington, the decision was made by the Rangers to stay in Arlington, build a new ballpark in Arlington. And I got to spend a lot of time with George W. Bush during those years as we worked with the city to help put together that proposal, the state to pass the half-cent economic development sales tax. And so my career path took a turn that is was totally unpredictable. If you had written this as a script and taken it to Hollywood, it would have been rejected outright. It would have been so unbelievable that it wouldn't even work in Hollywood. So that's why I say God moves in mysterious ways, and you need to listen to wise people who give you counsel and advice through your career, because where you think you're going and where you start off may not be where you end up.
That's one of my biggest things that I find is so interesting in life. There are some that my cousin's daughter, for instance, from the time she was 5, she said, I'm going to be a veterinarian. And she grew up and she is now a veterinarian in Burkburnett, Texas. There are some people like myself. I feel like sometimes we're in a pinball machine and you're bouncing off of the different, items in the pinball machine. You're gaining experience from each thing, but you're headed towards the same, you're headed towards a goal. It's interesting how some are so focused and remain on that track, and some, like myself and maybe yourself, as you say, listen to other people. That's very reassuring to me, is that you listen to other people and think about what they're saying. They see your talents. They see what you're good at, and they have a vision for you that you may not have considered. Let's pause for just a moment to hear from one of our great sponsors.
Hello, this is Jay Zacharias with the General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute and Museum, and I would like to tell you about one of our partner sponsors. His name is Justin Krieger, and he has worked as an independent insurance agent at Krieger Insurance Agency in his hometown of Hobart, Oklahoma since 1999. Justin is honored to help with the annual Celebration of Freedom event and has been a board member for the General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute and Museum for many years. He is also a fifth-generation farmer and rancher in Kiowa County, where cattle, crops, and even insurance is sold with a handshake. Give him a call at 580-726-3076 or come by the office if you would like to speak with Justin Krieger or Kathy Langford about insurance. We are thankful to our customers and friends who have supported us through the years. Again, Justin would like to say how honored he is to live in such a great country and how proud he is to help sponsor these podcasts. Please enjoy the rest of this podcast experience from your friends at Krieger Insurance Agency.
Now let's get back to our episode. So you worked with George Bush, and is that then your work on the ballpark and your work at the chamber, then how you got to be at the Texas Council on Workforce and Economic Competitiveness?
Yes. So after George W. Bush was elected governor, he appointed me to 2 positions. First was a legislative created commission called the Texas Strategic Economic Development Planning Commission. I served as vice chair of that group, which was trying to lay out a strategic vision for Texas' economic future that would be diversified, what kind of investments the state needed to make to be attractive to capital investment that would diversify the economy. I think that a lot of the foundation work that was done by that commission has paid off immensely for the state of Texas. As we know, how many people, I think we just hit the 30 million population mark, and a very vibrant, vital economy. And then after that commission's work was done and the report submitted to the state legislature, then the governor appointed me to chair the Texas Council on Workforce and Economic Competitiveness, which was a coordinating body among 5 different state agencies: the University of Texas system, the Texas Workforce Commission, the Department of Health and Human Services, and I'm probably missing something else in there. But it was trying to bring a degree of coordination and budget allocation and performance metrics across the state government that affected the preparedness of our workforce for the investments and the jobs of the future, and to make sure that we were helping those who were going through periods of unemployment transition and improve their skills.
So then Governor Bush becomes president, and you followed him to Washington, D.C. Do you want to share how all that happened?
Well, yeah, I was invited in once the 2000 election was finally over, as we all remember that contested election. I was invited to come to D.C. in January. They wanted to talk to me about positions within the U.S. Department of Commerce. And I guess the point that I would make there is what I was willing to do was to take on jobs that were really not high profile. They were not the jobs in state government appointments that people were really beating down the doors for. There were a lot of messes to clean up and to get things back in a working order. And so I got a reputation for taking on the hard jobs that other people really weren't looking for. And I remember the day before the inauguration in January of 2001, going into the temporary offices of the Office of Presidential Personnel and meeting Clay Johnson, who was the director of that office, and him taking me to introduce me to Dina Powell, who became a very close confidant of President Bush and has had a great career at Goldman Sachs. And Clay told her, he said, look, find a position for David, whatever he wants to do, you can count on him. He takes on the dirty jobs that nobody else wants to do, and he gets results. And so basically it was that reputation that I had built up here in Texas that led to that opportunity in DC. And so I was nominated in March of that year to be Assistant Secretary for Economic Development at the Department of Commerce. And, I guess that's the other key point that I would want to make. Doors may open that might not look significant or important at the time, but each leadership role, I believe, no matter the scope or capacity, no matter how humble they may be or non-prestigious, when you look back retrospectively, turn out to be very, very important leadership development roles.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really important to note, and I appreciate you pointing out the key things about leadership development and for our students and adult listeners. So, as Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development, then eventually you went on to Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Commerce. Do you want to share that?
Right.
transition?
In the second term, beginning of the second term, the president nominated me to be the Deputy Secretary of Commerce, which is the number 2 position within the Department of Commerce, the Chief Operating Officer for an agency of 50,000+ people all around the world, with a very broad portfolio from the International Trade Administration to NOAA, to the Patent and Trademark Office, to the Census Bureau, to the Technology Administration, to the Bureau of Industry and Security. So a very, very broad portfolio. And that was, that was a fabulous experience. As we entered then, I traveled all over the world on trade promotion trips on behalf of the secretary and the administration. Having a management portfolio that broad across 15 different agencies with 50,000+ people, and being responsible for ultimately making decisions on acquisition of weather satellites and such. It required a whole new level of management. And I had to become, every single day there was a different aspect of the Department of Commerce that I would be dealing with on that particular day. And so I had to become an expert of having a broad breadth of knowledge about the department and the issues the department were facing, and to be able to figure out what were the key elements, what were the three most important things that I needed to know about that issue on that particular day, so that I could make decisions or recommend intelligent, informed decisions to the secretary. And that required, every day was a vast learning experience. I mean, every night I would get a 3-inch thick notebook of material to prepare for the next day's meetings. If I was traveling abroad, as I did frequently, I think visiting some, I have to look at my pen case from around the world, but I think it's flag pin case, my best memory, some 35 countries around the world, understanding their socioeconomic, political situation, why our relationship with them was important, what I was there to try to accomplish. And so I had to become a very agile learner in that role as Deputy Secretary.
One of the questions I have for you is, we had the opportunity to discuss with Karl Rove his experiences in the White House. And one of the things that he mentioned that is very important to General Franks is how to disagree without being disagreeable, to be able to stand up and present your case and not be afraid to share that you feel differently about something. And that seemed to be an important part of the leadership culture in that administration, both in the state government and then also in Washington, D.C. Can you share with us what you saw as far as the leadership culture that you took from state government to Washington, D.C.? And then have you taken any of that culture with you into the private sector and how you manage?
Well, I would say that is the most influential experience on me, and I think I've tried to take all of that culture with me into the private sector. First of all, I would say who you work for is very, very important. I had a great life in Texas. I had a ranch in Texas. I had a great job in Texas as president and CEO of the Arlington Chamber. There were so many things on the horizon that were going to be so exciting to work on, including the new Cowboys stadium, which my team had done some preparatory work on before I moved to D.C. Were it not for the character of George W. Bush and knowing what his commitments were, the kind of person he was, I never would have uprooted my family and moved them to D.C. That was not an easy experience. It was especially not an easy experience on my wife, and I had twin boys at the time who were going into third grade, and had to make that move up there in a completely different environment in Fairfax County schools than what they experienced in Arlington. So it all begins with the tone at the top. Integrity, honesty, strategic vision. And so that's where it begins. Secondly, it's the people that the president surrounded himself with. He surrounded himself with quality people. I think of the two secretaries of commerce that I worked for, Don Evans. You'll not find a finer man on earth than Don Evans, who's from Midland, by the way. And the experience of working for Don Evans and Secretary Gutierrez, who was my second Secretary of Commerce that I served, men of great character. Think of the Deputy Secretary that I worked for in the first term, Dr. Sam Bodman. It begins at the top, but then that next layer of appointees, all the same kind of values and character. and do what's right. I remember, I think this says it all. It was shortly after 9/11, and I was working, representing the Department of Commerce on a White House task force on trying to figure out economic recovery issues for New York City and working with the New York City Partnership. And there was a particularly contentious hearing that I was facing up on Capitol Hill to provide testimony. And there were some cross currents among different federal agencies that had equities in that. And I remember seeking out the advice of Secretary Evans at the White House one day when we were there for a meeting. And I remember him saying, you tell the truth and you do what's right. What's the right thing to do? And you let me and the president figure out how to deal with the consequences of doing the right thing. That's what the president expects. And I knew that that was what the president expected based on my experience with him in Austin. And to have that kind of affirmation and direction from the Secretary of Commerce as I was preparing to go up on Capitol Hill is so empowering. You do the right thing, and then let us figure out how to deal with the consequences of doing the right thing. And I have, that's been my North Star in all of the issues I faced over the last 17 years, and a lot of some very, very controversial and tough decisions after the 2008 financial crisis affecting the financial services industry, and many other conflicts between member companies at time that I served. And my direction to my staff is that same direction that I received from Secretary Evans that day in the White House. Do the right thing, and then we'll figure out how to deal with the consequences of doing the right thing.
That is so powerful. Thank you for that. And, we share some of these key pieces in our social media, just the little quotes, and I hope you don't mind that. I absolutely want to share that because I think it's a very powerful thing. And so thank you for sharing that. How did you take that into the private sector, that what you do now?
Yeah. So, I think it's the basic management principles are the same. I did not have a background in the insurance industry other than as a consumer when I was recruited for this position, and I told the executive committee of the trade association made up of CEOs of the member insurance companies that, look, I don't have a background in insurance. And their response to me was, look, you're the chief operating officer of the U.S. Department of Commerce with 15 different operating units. We are confident that you can learn the business of insurance. And what we need is someone who can help this large industry be prepared for what's going to come at it in the years to come, and to help formulate policy. So the first challenge that I had was meeting my new team, and again, it comes from tone at the top, and the first day when I came into that new office in that new role, I had an all hands meeting with the team. I explained to them who I was, what the mission that I had been given by the board of directors to accomplish, what our strategic priorities were, and that I would be spending this first year getting to know them and doing more listening and learning than talking. And then I followed that up with the way I actually managed that first year. Not only meeting my staff and my team that were dispersed all over the country. We have people in every state capital. but also going directly into my member companies' offices, meeting with the CEOs of my member companies in their headquarters facilities, sitting down with them, spending hours at a time, learning what their priorities were, getting an understanding of their business model within the industry. Believing that if I could understand their business model, their P&L statements, that I would be able to understand intuitively what public policy issues were going to be important for them. But I had to demonstrate first and foremost that I cared about my new team. I cared about the members that I was recruited to serve, and laying that foundation was time consuming. It was exhausting, traveling around the country that first year. Every week I was on the road, but I think it's laid the foundation now for 17 years of exceptional success for the American Property Casualty Insurance Association, especially in light of the so many challenges that the industry has faced in the financial crisis of 2008, the most severe hurricane seasons we've ever experienced in history. And now, since 2017, every year has been a record-setting year for wildfires in the western United States. And so it all goes back to laying that strong foundation at the very front end.
How do you keep your people motivated despite the conflicts and the obstacles that you face?
Well, this goes back to the question you mentioned earlier about Carl's comments about the respect and collegiality of the team that the president put around him. And I would just say many of us, some of our closest friends, all these, 16 years later, are still those of us who worked together in that administration across cabinet agencies. But a leader, if he or she is going to make good decisions, needs the very best information that they can amass. And that means hearing from everyone at the table who has an equity in that issue. What I always told, my team, I'm not looking for yes people on my staff. If you're a yes person, then one of us is unnecessary. And so I always created a culture where everyone knew that the decision-making process was transparent, it was honest, it's respectful. There is absolutely, I think the team chemistry is so important, whether you're talking about an athletic team, whether you're talking about a military field staff, or whether you're talking about a corporate team. The chemistry is so important. There has to be trust, that there's no hidden agendas, that we are all focused on the essential mission, and that everyone has a voice at the table on these issues. And so I encourage a very robust dialogue. There may be times that I will say after one of those discussions, I may say, I need more information, and I ask more questions and ask to get back with me. But again, that's a transparent and above board process. And then, what I tell my team at the very beginning is, one of my absolutely essential expectations of my staff is loyalty. And loyalty does not mean having sycophants around you that tell you how great you are, or yes people. Loyalty in my mind means honesty, candor, and open communication during deliberation, and then execution once a decision is made. After all the views are aired, We've got all the information, not 100% perfect information, because if you wait till you get 100% information, you're never going to make a decision. And not making a decision is making a decision. So at some point, the leader of the organization has to say, I've got enough information. I understand the risk and the rewards. I understand the knowns and the unknowns. And here's the decision. And once that decision is made, then we all go out of that room as a team and we execute that decision. And look, there have been times in my career when I've had a team member that I've had to exit from the team because that chemistry was not there. There were concerns about are there other agendas at play here in these staff discussions, and that's just something that you can't have. And I would say I've never made that after I've made that decision that I needed to exit someone from the organization. I've never said, looking back, boy, I wish I had waited longer to make that decision. I have always said, I wish I had made this decision a long time ago, because those kinds of problems, unlike wine, never get better with age. And so at this point in my career, I'm pretty rigorous about that. I mean, I am an executive coach, a PhD corporate organizational psychologist that is a part of every senior staff decision that I make. It does evaluations ahead of time. And now I screen a lot more for those kind of EQ issues than I did early in my career. And I think that is something that's come with age and some tough lessons that I've had to learn. All of these people are qualified. If they weren't qualified professionally, they wouldn't be considered for these positions. So now I spend a lot more time on the EQ side, teamwork, ego, those kinds of things.
General Frank's 4 core principles of leadership, as I've probably previously shared with you, are that we use as our curriculum in the leadership program for our students are caring, communication, common vision, and character. And of course, we break down each one of those 4 core principles during our program and talk about what each one means. But I think you have extremely effectively broken down each one of these most important traits in, maybe not the exact word, but each important trait that makes up a strong leader. And it's really been so inspiring to listen to your story about the attributes that you look for in leaders and what you won't accept in your leaders. And what would you say to people just starting out in college in their career? You've mentioned some key points, or is there anything in particular that you would want to really say or express to our young students and maybe our adult listeners as well in decisions that they're looking to make to help them get on their pathway to success?
Well, I think first of all, it begins with character, as I've mentioned, at the very beginning. It is foundational for any leadership role. I'm reminded one of my twin sons was in the Marines, and so one of the people that I followed very, very closely was General Mattis, who was a great Marine commander. And I've in later years got to meet him and spend some time around him. And I'm reminded that General Mattis has said, ambition is good if your ambition is to be a servant leader. If the ambition is to get a bigger tent when you're a colonel, that's not appropriate ambition. You must be rooted in being a servant leader. So I think it comes back to character and as a foundation of leadership. Secondly, I would say work ethic. A big part of success is showing up day in and day out, learning day in and day out. Get rid of any entitlement mentality. You are not entitled to anything. Nobody is entitled to anything. And then finally, I would say, I think agility and resilience is an absolute essential trait on a pathway to success, because the world is changing so rapidly. The unthinkable, the unexpected is happening on a very regular basis throughout this part of the 21st century. And if you're not agile and adaptive and resilient and willing to learn every day, you're really not going to be very successful in whatever you choose to do.
Thank you so much. These are some really outstanding thoughts for leadership, and I know that this will speak to both our students and our adult listeners, as I mentioned. Is there anything else that you have on your mind that you would like to share that I haven't covered, ask you?
Well, I would just end on a couple of points. First, about people who are starting off in their careers. Don't be worried about the next steps. Try to do your best job in every role you're in, not just thinking about where the next position is. My experience is that people who are always thinking about promoting themselves or positioning themselves for promotion didn't excel in their current job and were not selected for other positions. And then the final thing I would say to young people and young professionals is, don't get discouraged. Great leadership often arises out of crises caused by failure of leadership. And I know, especially as we look at what's going on in Washington right now, in recent years, it's very easy for young people to get discouraged, and young people who aspire to public service. Don't get discouraged. Stay in the game. Prepare yourself. Winston Churchill, the great World War II leader of Great Britain, rose to greatness out of a time of crisis, existential crisis, where there had been a failure of leadership in the 1930s. And I am confident that with the young people of today and the young professionals of today, just don't get discouraged. The world needs you, and stay in the game. Prepare yourself.
I'm reminded, and I believe it's a Martin Luther King quote, of don't be afraid to take that first step just because you can't see the whole staircase.
Yep.
And
nothing says it better than that.
Thank you so very much. You have no idea how much I appreciate your time spent with us today and the valuable information that you've shared on your leadership, on your journey, and for all of our listeners. And thank you. I appreciate you so very much. And I look forward
it's a tremendous honor to be here. And I don't consider myself a great leader. I'm continuing to learn, but it's a tremendous honor to be invited to be a part of General Frank's Leadership Institute.
Well, thank you so much. And I truly believe, as we are here, that servant leadership is so important. And those that are willing to roll up their sleeves and get to work are true leaders. So thank you so much. And I look forward to visiting with you again.
Wonderful.
Thank you again to REI Oklahoma for making this podcast possible. For nearly 40 years, the board, staff, patrons, and supporters of the nonprofit economic development REI Oklahoma are committed to expanding Oklahoma's economic prosperity, earning the reputation of being one of the most comprehensive economic development organizations in the country. Business loans, training workshops, business consulting, and networking opportunities, as well as technical assistance and even commercial business space, are made available to Oklahoma entrepreneurs and small businesses. For low and moderate income individuals and families, down payment and or closing cost assistance is offered. Learn more at reiok.org. This has been the 4-Star Leadership Podcast. Now it's your turn, 4-Star listeners. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what you thought of this episode. Be sure to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and tune in next month for our next episode that airs every last Friday each month. Go be great.
The LaBarre family is a fourth-generation Oklahoma family. That may not sound like a long time, but our grandfathers were born here, within the Comanche Nation, before the land runs. We are the proudest sponsor of the Tommy Franks 4-Star Leadership Podcast. We hope listeners will heed the words of these distinguished men and women who have served our country at the highest levels and across all walks of life.